So here we have Putin's press secretary, since we're talking about Russia, once again batting his eyelashes, once again dodging the issue. And whenever asked about direct talks between Zelensky and Putin, Peskov manages to skillfully wriggle out of it, to evade, each time coming up with new excuses for why his boss can't even exchange a word with Zelensky. Well, I can tell you, Peskov knows what he's doing. And in reality, such a conversation between Zelensky and Putin is absolutely impossible and most likely will never happen. I mean, voluntarily from Putin's side, because a direct dialogue would undoubtedly be an image death for Putin. And his grave would be so deep that it would be very hard to even spit to its bottom. The thing is, Putin really hasn't learned how to have a conversation, in fact, over the past 20 years. He's only unlearned it. With any tough opponent, he's inevitably doomed to embarrassment, defeat, and being utterly dismantled. Zelensky, on the other hand, is courageous, quick-witted, has serious experience in debates and difficult conversations, and he's sharp and, when necessary, direct. And what about Vladimir Putin? Putin is essentially a modern-day Khan, a powerful and autocratic ruler, corrupted by 2 decades of meticulously rehearsed, carefully filtered, and pre-approved questions, corrupted by the intense fear of his courtiers, the sycophancy of oligarchs, and the obsequiousness of his own media. This ghoul has no idea about real dialogue, arguments, reasoning, or logic. All he knows how to do is what they call preaching. He knows how to proclaim his will and repeat all those memorized phrases about the peasant. And if he's put in a tough, no-nonsense negotiation setting with Zelensky, Putin will be completely helpless and tongue-tied. And the spectacle, yes, the spectacle will be utterly pathetic. The Kremlin apparatus, including Peskov, understands all this. And of course, they will never allow any direct conversation between Zelensky and Putin. Well, it's easy to check me on this. In the last 20 years, Putin has never dealt with an interlocutor who isn't afraid of him and who doesn't tremble in his presence. I'm not talking about world leaders, but about Russian media. And not just Russian ones either. There were always people floating in awe, with minds that had been polished to a mirror shine by the gentle hands of the Federal Penitentiary Service. Well, something like today's perfectly faceless, ideal, nobody media mannequin, Mr. Zarubin. Zarubin, you know who I'm talking about, right? He regularly brings out the chamber pot filled with Putin's informational excretions to the public, giving everyone a chance to take a sip and marvel. Putin's only argument is, I want to steal and kill, sure. It sounds dramatic, but in a serious conversation or negotiation, it can't be accepted, and he has no other argument. So all he has left is to stomp his feet and shout ahem, ahem at the top of his lungs. But where did this whole conversation about a meeting between the presidents, about a meeting between Zelensky and Putin even come from? This little conversation was revived after the third round of yet another pointless negotiations in Istanbul. These third round talks, surprisingly, turned out to be the shortest of all. With all the prolonged sitting down, the careful settling in, the audible grunting, and the slow, deliberate sipping of Borjomi, the entire process ultimately took just 38 minutes. As expected, really, the sides had absolutely nothing to talk about. The group of cannibals from the Russian Federation confirmed their desire to continue eating people. And the people politely informed the cannibals of their readiness and determination to continue killing cannibals. That's essentially is a brief, extremely concise and exhaustive summary of the substantive and principal part. And in passing, of course, they did resolve some issues regarding the next prisoner exchange, but naturally on the main topics, they remained incomprehensible to each other. But the Turks, by the way, had already grasped the problem and seated the delegations as far apart from each other as possible, because this overwhelming politeness on the faces of the Ukrainians clearly indicated a strong desire to punch the smirking envoys of the Russian world in the face. Well, unfortunately, I don't get involved in such things, but I can say that, of course, the Ukrainian delegation was really missing Uncle Madhyar. But after all this, Medinsky, the comic historian, affectedly informed humanity that Russia is ready for complete isolation and that having found itself in total blockade after the year 20, nevertheless, as he put it, won the war. Well, Medinsky is, of course, remarkable in that he's never shy about dazzling everyone with his ignorance of historical matters. Even the most well-known textbook aspects of history, as it turns out, are completely unknown to him. Ivleva or Instasamka could envy his dullness, but he doesn't need to know anything anyway. He made up his own version of history and pushes it to both through television and in textbooks, where he talks about complete isolation. But he forgets that relying solely on its own resources, the Stalinist army only retreated and surrendered, giving up regions, cities, territories, and republics to the Nazis. And things only started to improve, relatively speaking, after Lend-Lease began. It's also a lie that the USSR was in complete isolation since 1920. You'd have to be completely crazy to believe that. Just open, I don't know, a fourth grade textbook, and you'd find out that in 1933, the USSR was admitted to the League of Nations. That was the equivalent of today's UN. And the USSR had extensive trade and economic dealings with Czechoslovakia, France, Germany, worth many billions of marks, as well as with about 15 other countries. He also got carried away when claiming that the USSR won the war, because in reality it was, of course, the anti-Hitler coalition that won the war. It was nuclear weapons that ultimately decided the outcome of that war. But, you know, those who think differently from Medinsky will probably, of course, be re-educated.